maybe we can move a little bit more about the other major thing that PM Wong mentioned in the speech, which is about immigration and integration. And, sticking on to families a little bit before we dive in, is the question about who, is a good citizen, who becomes a good citizen. And will the new citizens' intention of starting families play a role in whether they're regarded a little bit more as a better choice or a better pick for the future of Singapore?
No. See, immigration is necessary, right? In many world, if we don't do that, like PM spoke about, we'll become like Japan, right? Only robots will be there, nothing more will be there. But what is immigration better? Immigration of the right quality, not only economic quality to support what they bring, the talent, everything else, but also the cultural sensitivities, how they integrate, be part of it, right? It should be like putting a sugar in the water, sugar disappears. It should be like that. It can't be that, water is poured on sugar. So that is why the calibrated approach is very good. Let me take my own example. 2004, when I got invitation to become a citizen, my daughter, who is a A-level after completing, I don't know where she got the idea, definitely not from me. She said, I want to do NS. And when his NS is not there, she went and joined Army. So what I'm trying to say, this is what will happen. But it took some time. 20 years I'm here. And without even, I'm telling, she got the culture and she feels proud about it. And for her, she knows only Singapore, right? So the point is, if you are able to bring the cultural integration more than the economic integration, so to say that the highly paid people attracting those kind of talent is important, but how they can mingle and be part of our society. There, they have to play a role. The PA, People Association, INC and others will have to play a role. And we, the existing citizens, we also be a little bit open-minded in knowing that there are differences. It's only a transition, and have some patience and get them integrated into society. It's a question, I think we are doing much better as compared to many other parts of the world.
So in terms of culture integration, so we don't doubt that the authorities here are doing a very good job in terms of filtering out who is good to be a PR or who they allow to cross borders into Singapore. Unfortunately, I think there are certain stereotypes that have been set out there that are not true and is unfairly judged upon, I feel. One of which is the consistent online criticism of SICCI, to which I think that's a larger topic of discussion, but we can discuss about that later on. But you can see a lot of efforts at this point of time being made on the ground to really try to integrate new citizens. What happened was, I believe, somewhere along the line, we were hoping that the new citizens would integrate to us. And that's where a lot of discontentment came, like, hey, I'm waiting for you to come and do something, and then you're just not doing anything. So I think now the focus has shifted towards what can we do to welcome you in better. Yeah. So if you look at certain grassroots initiatives and certain other initiatives from probably the organizations here, we have then opened the door to adopt a more welcoming culture towards, we as Singaporeans are ready to celebrate your culture rather than we expect you to celebrate ours. And so in vice versa now, both parties are able to really assimilate well together, and then you can feel the love spreading across and all that. Yeah.
Oh, this is, I mean, there are a few things to address here, right? Yeah. One is like, even who gets to decide what is a good citizen, and who gets to be here in that sense. So I think from the government side, from not IC, but whoever determines, or maybe it's IC, whoever determines, who gets to come in, that's one aspect of things. But I think beyond that, once people are here, is then to decide, like, okay, how do we as a society, Singaporeans and non-Singaporeans, want to integrate, right? So I think it even goes beyond like integrating before someone even becomes a citizen, because it's a long pipeline to get to that point. And that's where, with different organizations, I've had this conversation before around like, when are we going to engage with people, right? Because actually people are looking for community from the moment they come to another country, not just at the point when they become citizens. So it's very important that even at the grassroots level, we're able to engage them early on. Yep. At the same time, there's also the understanding that yes, it's public funds, right? There should be priorities for Singaporeans and PRs. But I do think that we also need to relook that in terms of integrating better and integrating and engaging early. Of course, not all people who come into the country are wanting to be citizens as well, because they have their own considerations, right? Sometimes they're coming here, it's a very transitionary point in time. They're coming here for work for a little bit, and then they're moving along. And then there's some people who do want to become citizens, right? So how can we also support them in their journey? Yeah, so I think this is where all of us can practice this level of a couple of things, 3 C's. The one is about curiosity for Singaporeans and non-Singaporeans, right? How can we be curious about one another? I think on Singaporeans' part, we are also global citizens, right? We are very connected as a country to the rest of the world, and there's a need to be. So we need to really practice this level of curiosity and understand that there's no particular benchmark that we should be expecting, right? Whoever comes in, we at every level, whether they're white-collar workers, blue-collar workers, how can we be curious about their lives and cultures and practices? The second part is about connection, right? How can we connect with one another? What does that look like? What are places that can enable this? What are organizations that can enable this? So I think in that regard, that we can also look at the more water cooler conversations, right? Or the equivalent of that, the informal spaces as well. And there's also value in these engagements. And then of course, formally, there are organizations that can step in to maybe lead these discussions, to create these avenues of events or engagements, and also to enable it to be more citizen-led. So it doesn't always have to be very top-down, right? So if there are more localized initiatives, I think that can be very helpful as well. And so from my perspective, I think about, because my parents moved here when I was a year old. My dad might have grown up here for a little bit, but my mom moved to a whole other country for the first time, right? And now we're all Singapore citizens, so I became a citizen very early, so did my mom. And so I think about her journey and how she really just wanted to connect, but more than that, she was looking for avenues of support. This was a time, I think, before Google Maps existed.
Yeah.
So she used to tell me she had like the Yellow Pages directory.
Yeah, the old
she was
school
sick
ones.
and she had to find out, like, someone just told her go to a polyclinic. She has no idea what is a polyclinic, right? So it's also about learning the language. Singlish, we have so many terms. And what any of my foreign friends have struggled with is acronyms.
True.
And that's when I realized, oh my gosh, we acronymize
True.
everything.
Yeah.
True.
So it's also about, we need to connect with people, we can share these avenues of support. And then the last part is about compassion. I think there's always going to be a gap between where we are and where we want to be. So how can we extend that compassion to ourselves as we navigate, how we're navigating these interactions, but also extend that compassion to others as well, as they're navigating their own lives and journeys. But from the economic perspective, I think there are also real considerations,
Yes.
especially with the world being very competitive, with whatever's happening around the world right now. I think there's also real considerations around people feeling like, oh, our job's going to be taken, right? Are there less opportunities if
Yeah.
more people come in? So I think that's also something that we are acknowledging as a society. But then what does that then translate to and look like,
True.
right? We do need to make sure, again, there is we're managing how many people come in at any point in time. Right, it's a comfortable level, but at the same time, we need to make sure there are opportunities
For
for
the locals.
Singaporeans, for the people who are coming in, right, and that is not just something that exists, but people understand that it exists, right, and opportunities are accessible.
Yes.
So I think there's also this conversation around social mobility as well. So I think there are greater conversations, and all these things actually intersect, right?
Beautiful.
So how these things are perceived and these concerns intersect is something, one, we need to acknowledge, but then we need to, again, whether it's a policy measure, and then how that translates into everyday actions, right, and it's accessible to people is something that we need to definitely look at more.
This year's speech, I think PM Wong did something pretty substantial in mentioning the NSF of the Year SI in the conversation about integration. And we have seen just this year also online social media attacks on the Indian community. We've seen, again, very open criticisms on SICCI online once again. So maybe, his mention of SI, do you think that helped or hurt these sentiments in any way?
I don't think, initial reactions will be there. See, he mentioned about Japanese, right? He talked about Malay community. We talked about, similarly, one guy. He happened to be an Indian, but he mentioned him because how he excelled in SAF and then stayed back and he's not even attending his rally, right? It's only on meritocracy. We talk about Singapore as a meritocracy. When you talk about meritocracy, we don't have a caste, creed, religion, nothing comes in between, race, right? But there will be some noise because the noise is not on SAI per se. It is an accumulated economic misery with the AI we are going through, the haves and have-nots. That's what she's talking about. Some of the people are flourishing, some of the people are not flourishing. I can't afford a house. They are in condos. And again, with social media, some of the episodical 3 or 4, 5 incidents can become boomerang. So we as Indians, I'm talking about as an Indian, I have a duty to see that our own flaws, we have to correct it, and ensure that the integration happens in a nice way. And then as Singaporeans, we'll also have a little bit magnanimity and patience in understanding these extraneous factors. Couple of examples, and leave it as an example, because everywhere there are some miscreants of that nature.
To get NSF of the year is not an easy task. As we are all aware that we have every Singaporean boy has to serve NS, and what he has achieved is truly from his own efforts, not because of who he is and where he comes from. So that is the first step. We can say that his portrayal at the NDR was deserved. It's not per se that he's there for any other reason. So that's the first step. The second step is very easy to also understand why there is some lash out towards that issue. Like what I touched upon earlier and what most of us have understood is that there are a lot of misconceptions going on behind SICCI.
True.
One is the misconception to think that they are going to be taking our jobs, which was highlighted by Nava. One is Mr. Venkat's position to go and say that because they are staying in certain areas of Singapore that are classified to be a little bit more higher end, or the cars that they drive and whatnot. So I think you cannot have one without the other in that aspect. What I can say is that as far as I'm aware, SICCI has been created as a tool to enhance the economy of Singapore through a country who has have had leaders and global branded CEOs all over the world. However, there is no inclination to go and say that just because these people are global leaders from the world coming into Singapore, there's a lack of jobs for the locals. All companies, I mean, SICCI would know this much better than me, I would assume, but all companies in Singapore still have to adhere by the quota rules, which means it's still 9 to 1.
Yeah.
There is no difference of whether, so for a global company, be it anywhere from the world that's coming into Singapore, we take SICCI aside for a while, from anywhere in the world right now, if we were to go and discuss a global brand coming into Singapore at this point of time, for them to have 5 of their office staff shifted into Singapore, they would have to hire 45 local Singaporeans.
Yes.
So, to me, it is a benefit to us as a community that more global brands are coming here. Because that means it is not that they're taking away our jobs. It means that now the tranche is open for us to have more jobs. So that's the misconception that's going around. It's hard to also understand, like I said, it's easy to understand why, but maybe productions like this would help go a long way to go and address these misconceptions and actually tell people what is the reality on the ground. Yeah.
In that very same regard, I feel like, even with Sai, like it's great that he has done this, but at the same time, we shouldn't expect everyone to do this and then we celebrate it. And only then we feel like they're worthy of being in this country, right? I don't think that's the case. So that's something that we also need to acknowledge and think about. The other aspects of this is, with the SICCI debate, I agree, right? It's an economic agreement fundamentally. It is meant to also support Singaporeans. It's meant to build relationships with different countries, and we have so many sort of agreements and we trade with the world, essentially. So it is very necessary for us to keep open to the possibilities and opportunities and see how that can help us as Singaporeans and support the people of our country in various regards. So that is one aspect of things. The other aspect of things is to also call it out for what it is. But prior to that, I also want to say maybe I'm on a different side of the internet. I think I'm on the kinder side of the internet. So I think it depends on like what sort of posts you're engaging with. I don't see a lot of backlash. So I do very intentionally talk to people and ask for feedback. So even amongst my peers, they have been very supportive about the NDR rally, about Sai being represented and his story being shared. I think that was really, really sweet. But in terms of like, calling it out for what it is, I think sometimes there is a level of xenophobia, or even on some level potentially racism as well. And then we need to acknowledge that, okay, these things are happening in pockets. I wouldn't say this is the the voices of the majority, right? I actually think sometimes when we see things on the internet, it can be a very loud minority actually,
True.
and then it gets amplified because sometimes bad news sells, and that's
Yeah,
the reality.
yeah.
They
Well
jump
said.
on the bandwagon and
Well
move
said.
forward, right?
So with the majority of people that I talk to, they're supportive, right?
supportive.
They are not xenophobic. People are curious. People are compassionate and in wanting to learn more about others, and are kind to others, right? How often do we face like racist incidents? I think it's actually kept to a minimum. Not that it doesn't happen, and sometimes it can be very unintentional, and then we have that conversation, right? Then in terms of the intentional side of things, we try to hold that space and we bridge that gap, right? Assume positive intent and we try to do better. So I think in these pockets where these things exist, we need to acknowledge it and we need to see how we can move forward and provide avenues to have conversations still instead of shutting it out,
Correct.
right? And with these sort of debates, sometimes, again, there are sometimes insecurities, right? Again, there's lived realities where people are maybe uncertain about the future, right? So again, with these different intersections, we need to acknowledge all of them, hold space for the complexity of this discussion, and also understand how we can better address it moving forward as well.
All right. I think to kind of close off on this discussion, it's been, a wonderful time. I think my question would be, there was so much said during the NDR, but is there anything that you would want to hear more for till the next NDR, whether it be in Parliament, in policy? Personally, I would say that I would like to know, especially about the land reclamation projects, where are we getting our sand from? Where are we getting all these resources to do it? And if there, just generally questions about what other avenues have they been discussing, what other projects have in mind. So I think that's kind of the main thing I would like to see being discussed in policy.
Yeah, on the one area, though we have been talking about, but I thought with the world and the war now, right, you can see huge uncertainty. We talked about uncertainty, but the impact is now, it seems like a perennial uncertainty. So for a country which depends on SMEs for employment, countries with WME, AI is coming and eating in one side, the globalization, anybody can work anywhere and do the work, number two, and the world trade tariffs and Canada tariff you heard, and he's threatening more tariffs. Cost of living is going up, inflation has already crossed 2%. We are giving handouts, that's good, great, but this needs a transformation, not an incremental part of it. I'm sure government is thinking about it, it's not an easy job, but I was thinking that there will be something announced for supporting the SMEs, MSMEs on that aspect, right? That may be coming in the days to come, because that's a necessity, and it is. I can feel, as from a chamber, I'm from representing chamber, I can feel many of them are either migrating or they don't know. Like you talked about sandwich, they're not AA savvy, but at the same time, cost pressure is very high, they're helpless. And these all things cannot be changed overnight. So in some way, we are doing our best as a chamber. Government is also have a lot of grants, but this requires not an incremental thought, but a transformative thought in terms of what we can do for these sectors, and so that they have hope and future.
Well, for me, I think I echo on Mr. Venkat's point. I think what I would have liked to hear, or maybe a few of my peers also would have mentioned to me as well, about how we are going to navigate in a greater way through this really uncertain period of time. I think a lot of the, even though we'd not like to, a lot of the external parties' decisions and the things that are moving forward are directly affecting our day-to-day living as a Singaporean here. We can't just close our eyes and shut our ears and believe that whatever's happening is not going to affect us. You could see the effect really trickling down into, like I mentioned, cost of living, which also then entail to other pressures, which also entail to bigger burdens faced by the everyday Singaporean. So it's a cyclical effect as we move forward. That was something that I felt would have been good to address, because those were questions that people really didn't have an answer to. Where is the oil price is going to be in a couple of years because day-to-day jobs require vehicular transport. Cost of living issues. If, like, for example, like you wanted to know about the sand, would sand cost more 10 years down the road? Would that mean that because of the cost of living, who's going to bear certain costs moving forward? So, with sand increasing, housing prices increasing, land prices increasing, so we just an umbrella to really come and shield us from all these things that are happening right now. So I think that would have been something good to address. Yeah.
Well, I agree with these sentiments. So I think additionally, right, and on top of that, I love my alliterations. So I'm going to maybe sum it up in like 3 C's. The first part is about being more conscious, right? So we spoke about various intersections of different topics, of very different lived realities and concerns that people have. So I think it's just keeping that in mind and then understanding like where would policy come in, but then how does it translate to very day-to-day realities for everyone on the ground, right? So I think keeping that in mind from a more conscious level, but then also thinking about what are the values that we want to embody as a country moving forward. Because if we are changing so rapidly, the world is changing so rapidly, we do get to decide what our future looks like, right? And when we develop, at what cost, at whose cost, and who gets to be part of that conversation as well. Because we're creating the future, not just for the people who exist today, but for people who are not even on this earth yet, right? But that is the future that we are building for in the long term. And Singapore looks at long-term planning. So we do need to identify what that is for us, and we get to decide what that looks like for us. So when you talk about like land reclamation, I think there's a lot of conversation about it. And I can understand from a land planning perspective that, yeah, we need more land, right? But then we also need to think about, again, at what cost are we going to do this, right? Is it our environment? Is it our seas, our ecosystem that has taken hundreds and thousands of years to build? And then what kind of like gives and takes are we willing to kind of, go off of in the name of development? The second part is about capital. So to make all these futures that we want possible, right? And as we work towards that, what sort of investments are we willing to make and we need to make? So I think the financial part of it is something we always talk about. But beyond that, there are also other forms of capital. So the physical side of like the infrastructure elements, the social capital part of it, right? Again, we also need to talk about accessibility, because social capital sometimes is very concentrated in certain circles. So how can we make it more decentralized as well? And then beyond that, there are things like decisional capital, right? Who is making decisions? Who's at the table? Who gets to be part of that table? And then should we build more tables also, right? So that's another conversation. And we also need to look at intellectual capital, right? Building capabilities. So I think around like this whole AI conversation, we've spoken about retraining people. The opportunities that come with it, of course, there's also some challenges. So even from the business side of things, we're looking at, the possibilities for even SMEs, right? Where they now have this level of capital to build systems, operationalize things faster. So there are people who can also start businesses faster, and some businesses can scale better. So there are opportunities that come with that. But part of it is also the conversation around like who might get left behind as well, and what capital we need to ensure that the right capabilities are built for individuals to transit properly. And the last part, and I think that is very important, is the dream capital aspect, right? What are these futures that we envision collectively? And are we enabled to then dream of these possibilities as well? Because when people are struggling, that might be hard to really imagine, right? So we need that space to imagine it so we can work towards it as well. And the last part is community, which is underlying all of it is a very human element, right? People need to know what we're working towards. So just speaking from like a youth perspective, I think it's also about, a lot of young people. I think so in this discussion there was, I think in the NDR there was mention about singles, but we'll come back to it later.
Yeah.
So as a single person, I'm looking out for these announcements. But I think also about conversations about youth, right? So yes, there's a lot of investment in education and things like that, but it's also about young people feeling a sense of agency to be part of that conversation. And it's not about having policies just made for us, but how can we be part of the conversation and making these policies together with the different facets of society and envisioning these futures together as well. So I'm very thankful that National Youth Council had the announcement for the youth plan very recently. So there's a 5-year plan for that. But I think, even beyond that, there needs to be greater conversation. And I think most importantly for the different facets of society and the community, right? Whether it's young, elderly, caregivers, parents, non-parents, new citizens, right? And even people coming into the country, for all of us to work together and understand that these conversations are happening. But there's always more that can be done better as well.
All right. I think that's about it. So thank you, Nava. Thank you, Rajesh. And thank you, Mr. Venkat.
Thank you.
Thank
You were
you so
well
much.
moderated.
And I would say that if you would like to keep up with our reporting, you can check out our website on tabla.com.sg, and we'll see you in the next episode. Thank you.